some positive leftist news with Mexi.
Cheers to another powerful month for workers' struggle. Some key things initiated in last month's strike wave have now come to fruition, and we are happy to report that workers' momentum is not slowing down. Another Striketober event that didn't get as much press was the major general strike in Italy. On October 11th, trade unions, student and youth groups, leftist political parties, anti-imperialists, and housing rights groups organized nationwide mobilizations and a general strike against the government's assault on labor rights, the imposition of austerity policies, and the handling of the COVID-19 crisis. Workers also protested a far-right attack on the headquarters of the Italian General Confederation of Labor in Rome. Giuliano Granato, national spokesperson of Potere al Popolo, said thousands of people are losing their jobs. We cannot let the companies and the government force the workers to pay the cost of the crisis. This is a repeat of 2008, another crisis that they want the workers to pay for, but they have to pay for it, the bosses and the government. Major mobilizations occurred in several cities, including Rome, Turin, Milan, Genoa, Bologna, Florence, Naples, Taranto, and Palermo, among others. Workers blocked the Amazon hub in Piacenza, interrupted freight traffic in the ports of Naples and Genoa, and organized pickets that disrupted most supply chains. Students also joined the marches in large numbers. The Front of Communist Youth said that 2 years of pandemic and contagions in schools were not enough for the state to invest in the safety of school buildings. We find ourselves with the same crumbling plexes, buses always crowded and old. They promise us education money, but we find ourselves with increasingly expensive books, and the only reforms aim to make our schools become business schools. Enough of this. Together with the workers, we block the country. And at the very end of last month, October 30th, thousands of protesters took the streets in Rome to send a message to the G20 leaders meeting in the city, accusing them of propping up a model of economic development that has exacerbated global problems. Many made connections between the G20 and the COP26 climate talks, displaying banners such as "From Rome to Glasgow, your initiatives are the problem," and "The catastrophe is here, it's time to act." Flavio, a 17-year-old high school student, said his generation had the right to be angry because today's political reality has brought us to environmental catastrophe. But until people question the current capitalist economic model, nothing will be resolved, he said. Christina Ray, a PhD student from Bologna, said we shouldn't have to get to human extinction for them to listen to us. Our message to the G20 is don't get comfortable, because we won't watch while you destroy our future. Absolutely, we will not. Workers everywhere are becoming more educated, agitated, and organized than I've seen in my lifetime. It is brilliant to witness. And this organization and fierce militancy is paying off. In India, farmers and workers across the country have been striking and demonstrating for a year now against neoliberal farm laws. This month, they got word that their movement won, as Modi's government was forced to repeal the anti-worker reforms. Their solidarity in the face of police brutality and fierce government repression forced the change they demanded and deserved, and will hopefully inspire workers everywhere to know that when we're united and determined, no strongman politician or corporate stooges can stop us. This is also evident in the victory for John Deere workers, who ratified a new 6-year contract this month after a 35-day strike. After turning down 2 proposed contracts, workers ratified the third with 61% of the vote. The new contract includes an $8,500 signing bonus, a 20% increase in wages over the lifetime of the contract with 10% this year, the return of cost of living adjustments, 3% lump sum payments, enhanced options for retirement, and enhanced CIPP performance benefits. Healthcare will remain the same for the life of the agreement. UAW Region 4 Director Ron McInroy said our members stood together and did not waver. Members and their families put a lot on the line for these gains, and the community support was overwhelming. I'd like to thank the John Deere members, their families, their leaders, and our bargaining team for standing firm and achieving these important gains. Congratulations to all the workers and negotiators who made this possible. Late last month, over 900 striking culture workers in Norway were victorious in their fight to secure a permanent collective pension that works equally for people of all genders. The strike began in early September with opera, theater actor, and orchestra workers and escalated to over 900 workers throughout September and October, culminating in the new agreement on October 25th. In 2016, the workers' pensions were restricted in a move that employers said would be just temporary to ensure the sustainability of their institutions. Their failure to live up to their promises prompted the strike, as did the workers' concern for gender parity. Under the restricted plan, women would suffer as they typically live longer than men, meaning that their pension money would be spread out over many more years. LO said the difference would amount to more than 1,000 kroner a month, or a total of more than 400,000 during the time from when she retires until she reaches life expectancy. Fantastic to see workers standing their ground and demanding equal rights for all workers. Amazon employees in more than 20 countries organized a global strike on Black Friday as part of the Make Amazon Pay campaign, which is a coalition of 70 trade unions and organizations including Amazon Workers International, Greenpeace, and Oxfam. Individuals everywhere, from oil refineries to factories to warehouses to data centers to corporate offices, participated in the event on November 26th. Make Amazon Pay's demands include increased salaries, better job security, and suspending the harsh productivity and surveillance regime Amazon has used to squeeze workers. The coalition also calls for a payback to society that includes enhanced sustainability efforts, increased transparency over data and privacy, and ending partnerships with police forces and immigration authorities that are institutionally racist. Make Amazon Pay wrote that Amazon is not alone in these bad practices, but it sits at the heart of a failed system that drives the inequality, climate breakdown, and democratic decay that scar our age. Solidarity with the activists who are fighting this failed system tooth and nail worldwide. Faculty at the University of Pittsburgh have voted 71% to 29% to form a union, joining the United Steelworkers. With more than 3,000 people represented, Pitt faculty created the largest new union of any kind in the country this year, which organizers say will usher in a new era of faculty administration relations at the university. Dozens of Pitt faculty, both organizers and supporters, gathered at the United Steelworkers headquarters to celebrate their victory and reflect on the years-long campaign. Chris Deluzio, an adjunct at the law school and a candidate for Pennsylvania's 17th congressional district, said it's a huge win, not just for us as faculty, but for the university and our students. It sends a huge message to workers in Western Pennsylvania that labor is not on defense anymore. The workers at Image Comics have formed a union, Comic Book Workers United, represented by the Communications Workers of America. Among their demands are salary and workload transparency for all existing and proposed job titles, the continuation of remote work for any employee who requests it, and the creation of a detailed policy outlining how the company will provide reasonable accommodations and supplies for remote employees, and the addition of a collective voting option to immediately cancel publication of any title whose creators have been found to have engaged in abuse, sexual assault, racism and xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, ableism, etc., until such a time as said creators have engaged in meaningful reparations toward affected persons. So far, Image has refused to recognize the union, forcing a vote, but workers are steadfast as 10 out of 12 eligible voters have already pledged to create the union. Many may not be aware of the extent of worker exploitation in the comic industry, and union organizers are fighting in largely uncharted waters. Solidarity with workers at Image, and may this set a precedent for labor rights in comic book publishing. Portugal has banned bosses from text messaging and emailing staff outside of working hours as part of new laws called the Right to Rest. The changes are being introduced to improve work-life balance as people are increasingly working from home as the pandemic drags on. Companies with more than 10 staff will now face fines if they contact employees outside their contracted hours. There are also new rules on allowing staff with children to work remotely. Parents will be allowed to work at home indefinitely without seeking prior approval from their employers until their child turns 8, and companies may also have to contribute to higher household bills from employees being home-based, such as energy and internet costs. Fantastic to see, as work-life balance for so many people was already pretty pathetic even before the pandemic hit. Hopefully organizers can push for similar changes elsewhere. In Maine, the organization Food and Medicine held its annual Solidarity Harvest this month, providing 1,500 food baskets across the state, with each food basket feeding 8 to 10 people. But unlike a normal food drive, the Solidarity Harvest is not an act of charity, but one of solidarity, bringing together farmers, unions, nonprofits, and civic and political groups to address the issue of food insecurity in Maine, which is the 9th most food insecure state. None of the recipients are means tested or ask for anything in return, and Food and Medicine's ultimate goal is to organize people to create a world where no one has to choose between food or medicine. Each box included a land acknowledgement recognizing the land as the unceded territory of the Wabanaki people, and among the sponsors for the harvest were over 24 labor unions and Maine DSA. The food came from local farms and orchards, and Food and Medicine worked with over 100 partners to ensure boxes got to as many families in need as possible. Youth activists forced the Los Angeles Unified School District to cut its police budget by $25 million in the summer of 2020, and early this year, following months of student campaigning, it redirected that money towards a $36.5 million Black Student Achievement Plan. They have also managed to replace police with mental health counselors at 53 schools with high concentrations of Black students, assign all secondary schools in the district climate coaches, and fund ethnic studies curriculums. Cops on campuses make students unsafe and contribute to the racist school-to-prison pipeline. Fantastic to see young people taking charge and kicking them out. RUNASUR is a Native, Black, and labor-led organization headed by Evo Morales, founded in April of 2021 with the aim of making Latin America plurinational. Plurinationality refers to the recognition that many nations exist within each state and deserve autonomy within it. For the organization, plurinationality is a way to prevent the assimilation of Indigenous nations, and RUNASUR is important because it spreads Indigenous politics at an international level and continues the plurinational revolution of Bolivia and Ecuador, following the philosophy of Buen Vivir, or living well, to create harmony and humanity via socialism, and with Pachamama, or Mother Earth. In their second international meeting on November the 3rd, delegates from Bolivia, Ecuador, Venezuela, and Argentina came up with 4 agreements for the future of the organization: prevent U.S. interventionism and coups, protect natural and governmental resources, forge a unity of the oppressed, and to meet for a 3rd time in Cusco, Peru on December 20th, 2021. Morales laid out 10 decolonial commandments for the organization, including defending Indigenous self-determination, reaffirming plurinational cultural and linguistic diversity, consolidating anti-imperialism, strengthening Mother Earth's rights and protections, recovering millenarian principles of life, decoloniality, and depatriarchalization, and developing a social economic model with just distribution. In Mi'kma'ki, or so-called Nova Scotia, 200 acres of mostly forest was returned to the Mi'kmaq. Jim and Margaret Drescher, who owned the wilderness retreat called Windhorse Farm, decided that the land should be returned to the people it was taken from through colonization, and so through the combination of a gift and purchase, the land is being transferred to Ulnuweg Education Center, an Indigenous-led charitable organization. Ulnuweg Education Center's Chief Operating Officer Chris Gugu said, "It's more than just a piece of property to us. I just immediately had visions of our Indigenous children and non-Indigenous children as well, running through the forest, that ancient forest, and learning about the interconnectedness between us and Mother Earth." Gugu believes this is the first time a land transfer like this has ever happened with an Indigenous charity in Nova Scotia. After a 13-year struggle, Britney Spears is finally free of her conservatorship. You may be wondering why we are reporting on this on PLN, but in truth, this is a disability justice issue. Spears' case has been high profile and yet still dragged on for ages despite her wealth and fame, but there are many people suffering under unjust conservatorships who are not receiving media attention. Hopefully, Britney's publicized struggle will cast light on the practice. The conservatorship forced Britney to be medicated against her will, forced her to get an IUD despite wanting more children, and included several other violations of her human rights. Britney attributes her release to the hard work of the many members of the Free Britney movement. On the 16th of November, the International Olympic Committee announced a new framework centering inclusion and non-discrimination for elite-level athletes. The framework upholds gender autonomy, supporting transgender athletes and athletes with sex variations, and underscores that these athletes have no inherent advantage. Quinn, Canadian Olympic gold medalist and athlete ally ambassador, stated this new IOC framework is groundbreaking in the way that it reflects what we know to be true, that athletes like me and my peers participate in sports without any inherent advantage, and that our humanity deserves to be respected. Canadian Blood Services are preparing to end the ban on donations from gay and bisexual men by scrapping their questions around gender or sexuality and replacing them with questions around high-risk sexual behavior more broadly. Currently, men volunteering to give blood are asked if they have had sex with a man in the last 3 months. Women wishing to donate are asked if in the last 3 months they have had sex with a man who, in the last 12 months, had sex with another man. But it's sexual behavior, not sexual orientation, that determines risk of HIV transmission. By changing the screening process, Nathan Lachowski, one of several researchers whose work will inform Canadian Blood Services application, stated that this means we're increasing, in my mind, the safety of the blood system broadly. Late last month, an anti-trans bigot was protesting outside high schools in Ottawa, saying children are never in the wrong body and opposing puberty blockers. In response, hundreds of trans youth and their allies staged a counter-protest at Broadview Public School and Nepean High School, chanting "Trans kids matter" and "Leave our city." The protesters successfully drowned out and chased off the bigot and his supporters, and the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board posted a warning to parents on social media about the man's protest, calling it an act of hatred and promising to ensure that there was no further trespassing on school property. Christian Wright, founder of Rainbow Carleton, said counter-protesters wanted to reassure trans youth that they are loved, they are valued, and they have the ability to make decisions in their lives. China has set up its first clinic for trans children and adolescents in Shanghai. This multidisciplinary clinic was set up at the Children's Hospital at Fudan University in Shanghai to safely and healthily manage transgender minors' transitions. Hundreds of people took to the streets in Mexico's capital on the Day of Dead Women, a women's march held the day after the Day of the Dead, to protest the nation's increase in femicides. There has been a 130% increase in femicides in Mexico between 2015 and 2020, with 762 women being murdered between January and September of this year alone. Bearing crosses with the names of the murder victims immortalized, they chanted "We are your voice," and took to microphones to recite the names of each of the deceased. On the 22nd of November, Nicaragua's Supreme Electoral Council certified the re-election of Daniel Ortega of the Sandinista Front Alliance after he surpassed 75% of the vote. This will mean that he will continue in office for a fourth consecutive term until 2027. This is a huge victory given the history of the struggle of the Sandinistas, the imperialist propaganda war against them, and the multiple attempts that have been made to destabilize Ortega's presidency. In Venezuela, the opposition, led by neoliberal stooge Juan Guaido, broke a nearly 4-year election boycott to take part in mayoral and gubernatorial votes, but opposition candidates won in only 3 of 23 states. It was a decisive victory for the PSUV, and Guaido said that the opposition needed to rebuild itself after the heavy defeat. On November 13th, college students from the University of Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon University, and Chatham University marched to protest against the holdings of these universities' endowments in fossil fuel corporations and demand immediate divestment. This is the first collaborative protest by these 3 universities with the sole purpose of demanding divestment. This serves as a first step toward organizing larger coalitions based on the principles of fossil fuel divestment across multiple universities. America's largest universities, including Rutgers, University of Southern California, Georgetown, Columbia, and most recently Harvard University, with the world's largest university endowment, have all committed to immediate divestment thanks to pressure from students and their allies. Fantastic to see this level of student organization in the face of deeply entrenched fossil fuel interests. Raden Roro Hendarti, a librarian in Indonesia, has launched a program designed to inspire kids to read more and to care for the environment. Raden trades books to local children in exchange for bags of trash and recyclables they collect. Raden collects about 220 pounds of trash each week, which her colleagues sort for recycling or sale. Let's build a culture of literacy from a young age to mitigate the harm of the online world, Raden said. We should also take care of our waste in order to fight climate change and to save the earth from trash. Helsinki, Finland has announced that it will cease to serve meat dishes or use disposable tableware for city events at the start of next year. The policy outlines that meat dishes will be replaced with seasonal vegetarian options, which will potentially include responsibly caught fish, but specifies that exceptions may exist for justified reasons. The move is intended to take environmental concerns more seriously at an institutional level, as drastic reductions in emissions are needed immediately. The French Parliament has voted in legislation that will ban wild animal performances in 2 years' time. This includes wild animal performances at circuses, nightclubs, private parties, and on television shows. Additional legislation banning dolphin shows and mink farming has also been enacted. Animal rights activists are pleased but wanted the legislation to go further with additional protections for animals at industrial farms, foie gras farms, and bullfighting. Polling shows French citizens are majority in favor of stronger protection for wild circus animals, with several French towns already banning these performances. May all countries take a stand against the cruel exploitation of our sentient relations for sheer entertainment purposes. Octopuses, crabs, and lobsters are to be recognized as sentient beings and receive greater animal welfare protection under new UK law. This follows report findings from the London School of Economics that demonstrated strong scientific evidence that these animals are capable of experiencing pain, harm, and distress. The scope of the Animal Welfare Sentience Bill will thus be extended to all decapod crustaceans and cephalopod mollusks. Jonathan Berth, Associate Professor at LSE, stated one way the UK can lead on animal welfare is by protecting these invertebrate animals that humans have often completely disregarded. Peter Hatch, a member of the Confederated Tribes of Silets, is the spokesperson of the Alaka Alliance, which is working to bring otters back to the coastal waters of Oregon. The lives of these tool-using marine mammals were once intertwined with those of the coastal tribes in Oregon, but the global fur trade nearly caused their extinction. We survived and the sea otters didn't, Hatch says. That leaves us with a level of responsibility to undo the wrongs that all people, whatever their particular background, we've had our own small part in committing. It's about restoring that relationship, about bringing back a relative. The Alaka Alliance completed a feasibility study that looks into the ecological, industrial, and cultural impacts of reintroducing otters to these waters, and concluded that there are no unresolvable barriers for the reintroduction of these adorable comrades, despite objections from commercial crab fishers. The Alliance is working towards a healthy marine ecosystem that includes otters within 50 years. Comrades, if you have good news from the current month, please send your stories to totalliberationpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you to Javi for the positive news jams. Thank you to Halcyon for the positive news background. Thank you to Catherine and Ash for scriptwriting help, and thank you to Tristan for editing this video. Thank you also to our wonderful patrons who make the show possible. If you'd like to become a sustaining member, please go to patreon.com/positiveleftistnews, or you can give us a one-time tip and donation via PayPal. The link is in the description box below.
Sometimes